So you have already mentioned the 5 stages of grief, and these are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I want to offer listeners a rough outline on how they can expect to heal using this model, because I think we think that we start at denial and we end at acceptance and we've graduated. But I found that the stages of grief are cyclical, and one day you'll be in denial, one day you'll be in depression, one day you'll be in acceptance, and then another day you'll be in depression. So for me personally, I'm a pretty accepting person. Like, I go through, like I drop my phone and it breaks, I'm like, acceptance. What do we need to do to get a new phone? Do you know what I mean? So I reach acceptance pretty quickly. Obviously, depression has been big for me. Bargaining is interesting. I want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not sure I went through bargaining, but maybe I did.
But listen to this, because grieving, you already mentioned that losing your father and your mother were different experiences. It's almost like when my grandma was the most important person to me in my entire life, and you kind of weigh that against other people, and you're like, well, can you take this uncle I don't talk to? Do you know what I mean? I hate to sound morbid, but it's part of the bargaining stage. Like, who could you take instead? And my biggest thing was, I have one grandmother left. I always expected my grand to be my last grandparent, and she was my second one to go. I was born with all 4 of them, and we were saying, like, we come up with how we think they're gonna pass, but it blows my mind that she was only the second one. So I'm like, well, your mind does things where, and that's my experience with bargaining. But anyway, I'll let you talk a little bit about the stages of grief and how listeners can expect to work through them.
Yeah, you don't know denial until you're past it. It's like, oh, jeez, I was denying that. The anger, oh God, I'm really good at anger. I mean, because anger is energy. And like when my dad died, I was furious, not at him. I thought I'd be angry at them, but I was angry at Lemoyne. Well, what it was I had a hard time, I remember I had said that, I had to come back and teach, and what I needed was somebody to say you don't need to. So, well, what had happened was I was sitting in the ICU waiting room, and so I said, well, okay, what is the FML, family medical leave? So I'm looking at...
Oh my God, in my generation, that's my life.
Oh yeah, oh gosh. Yeah, well... But,
FML.
Yeah, well, you kind of need FMLA when you FML. So I'm looking it up, and I'm coming across nothing on the Lemoyne website.
You're saying in regards to
Family Medical Leave Act. And so, I mean, it was my fault. I gave up. And nobody's saying, oh, well, why don't you? And so it was very easy to get angry at Lemoyne and just be mad at the institution, mad at HR, mad that there was no readily available information for taking this time off, just mad. And because then I didn't get mad at people who were close to me. Mad had an energy to it that depression doesn't.
A fire.
Yeah.
It's almost like anger is the presence of a fire, and depression is the lack thereof.
Yeah. Well, what depression was I would remember in the winter when the fire kind of smoldered out and we're moving into the spring semester, and I would sit and look out my window, and it was like I saw a gigantic hole in the backyard, and I was sitting on the edge of it. And I didn't want to jump into it. And at no time was I suicidal. But I was thinking, why am I still alive? I didn't want to be dead. And I just kept thinking about my mother. I couldn't put her through something like that. I couldn't put Doug through something like that. I couldn't put my brothers through something like that. But I didn't really want to be dead. I was just like, but why am I still alive? How can you feel like this and still be alive? What am I alive for? And I've gone through that with my mother too. So the depression part, a lot of this I went through ahead of time with my mother, because I had to, since we knew we were moving her to an assisted living facility, and since we knew we were moving her, that we were going to pack up I had to pack up her house. First I had to just get it in a way that it would be, ready to go on the market. And then I had to pack it up so that some of the stuff would go into storage and some of the stuff would go to her assisted living apartment. And then as she continued to decline, I had to, okay, it's all going to storage. And it just kept snowballing. But in any case, what that meant was, and here's another kink. After the whole COVID episode, she decided she was going to move from Houston to Austin.
Oh, perfect, as you do.
Oh, God. And, and so you get frustrated, and you start to realize that as your parents age, you start to realize what you put them through when you were a kid. And so what I had to do was, she hadn't fully unpacked from that. And so I'm going through all of these boxes and sorting things through. And I'm going through a lot of old childhood stuff and anger, both junk in the boxes, but also in my head that I thought I was over. And so I'm sorting through it again. And
that can be like literal and figurative.
Oh my God, yes.
Like all encompassing.
Oh, and it was itself an experience because she also had stuff that she had cleaned out of my grandmother's house. And so it was like when I first walked into her house, she had moved into a 4-bedroom house. Why did one woman, move into a 4-bedroom house? And then I saw, oh God, she imagined all of us coming to visit my brothers with their kids. And I just almost broke down. And so what I started to do in that was like that feeling of breaking down, I'd put in what I called the fortress.
Okay.
I imagine it like one of those, old forts you visit in England on a hill, a castle on a hill. I just put it in the fortress. I can't deal with this. And then I'd come across like the stuff people keep tells you a lot about them. And some stuff I'm like, why? Other stuff, it's just like my grandmother's stuff. I'm like, oh, I suddenly have this great insight into my grandmother of how she, who grew up poor, sharecropping, but became a principal of got a master's degree when women didn't do these things. Have a picture of her meeting, even though she hated his guts. Hated his guts. Richard Nixon.
Wow.
Because she met all of these presidents, like up to Jimmy Carter.
Wow.
Because of her, work in teachers' education, national organizations. And, how here she is, fur coats and all of this China. And I'm like, okay, now I see how she saw, how she wanted, this was how she wanted to be. And then, so as I'm packing all of this away, but at the same time, I'm going through stuff and I'm just getting angry about a whole bunch of other dysfunctional stuff. And I talked to my therapist long distance. Hi, I'm in Texas.
Yeah.
And she said, I think you're mad at your mother because she's dying. And you're mad she's dying. She's going away from you. She's leaving you. And I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And then I look back and I'm like, yes, I was. Yes, I was. And one of the things I have a hard time looking back at now is, in that time, I would go visit my mother while she was still in the facility in Texas, and how miserable she was. And knowing what she needed and knowing I didn't have the wherewithal, the energy to give it to her. And so I arranged for somebody to come in and talk with her. After that, her attitude towards moving to Florida really changed. But I still think I thought I was paying attention, and I wasn't, because I was denying that. And one of the things I have a hard time looking at now that I sometimes put in the fortress is that was the end. And I was so focused on getting her house packed up and my shit and dealing with all of that I wasn't paying attention to her and what she was going through and what she needed. beyond getting her somebody to talk to. And that, you know, that's still one of the guilts I'm working through.
When I was in therapy, she asked me, if she was standing in front of you right now, like, what would you do? And I was like, I would just drop to my knees and cry.
Yeah.
And then it's somehow like everything would be better. I'm confident.
Yeah.
All my problems would be fixed. It just, because being with her felt right and being apart with her felt wrong.
Yeah.
And I talked to her about some of those guilts, similar to what you mentioned.
Yeah.
And she said, Anthony, that's not real life. You're not going to go to her house every day and drop to your knees and cry in her lap. So that made me feel a little better, that it's like, oh, you know, you're valid in how you felt at the time. And you can't know what you know now while they're still alive. It's like their death teaches you things that you couldn't have, even if you think you know. Like, and that clicked for me. I'm like, if she was still alive, I wouldn't go and drop to her knees every day and cry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, is what I keep asking, what kept me from being that way?
Yeah.
And that was the reality of it.
Yeah.
And this is, we were watching Stranger Things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, the 4th season. And there's the episode where Max thinks she's going to be killed by the bad guy, by the monster. And she goes to her brother's grave, the brother who died this season before, and he was an asshole anyway. But she goes to read this letter to him. The person, whoever wrote that scene, has been there. She's reading this letter to him that expresses all of this grief and guilt and awareness that they hated each other, but also grief for his loss. And that was such an honest scene. And I like that. I feel that you wish, if they were here, you could make it better.
Right.
But then there's the reality of what it was.
Right.
And then you go running up that hill. But because that's the song, the Kate Bush song.
Oh, yeah.
So, which also, having that song was very affecting, because when it was popular, I remember that period of my life. But then when I graduated from college a few years later, I got the whole album, and that was just really, an album. I don't know if
the kids don't know.
Yeah,
I had CDs.
Okay, but it's a concept.
Yeah.
CD, and it's a concept, and I would just listen to the whole thing over and over and over and over again. And you know how it just can become important to you.